I'm Stephen Morrissey, Managing Editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, and I'm talking with Bruce Chabner, a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and director of clinical research at the MGH Cancer Center at Massachusetts General Hospital. We're discussing shortages of generic drugs. Dr. Chabner, in a current perspective article, Metzger et al. Examined one shortage of a cancer drug, Mechlorethamine, or nitrogen mustard, and the effect it's having on children with Hodgkin's lymphoma. The drug that's had to be substituted, cyclophosphamide, turns out to be significantly less effective, and more patients have had to undergo salvage therapy that is associated with infertility and a greater risk of long-term toxic effects. How common is this story, a curable cancer that has essentially become less curable because of a drug shortage?
I can't say that that's common. We experienced significant shortages of methotrexate about a year ago, another very important drug for leukemia and certain kinds of lymphomas and other uses. And we were forced to establish a priority list for patients, those that had potentially curable disease. We used the drug, but we restricted use from those that would only be palliated, that is helped or comforted by the treatment but not cured. And that was a significant issue for us. We hated to do that, but the drug was just not available. I'm not aware of a shortage that has led to very significant impact on outcomes for cancer patients, but it certainly has caused a lot of other kinds of problems for us.
We've heard the most about shortages of cancer drugs, but you pointed out in a perspective article last year that there are similar problems in other medical specialties. Have you heard stories from colleagues in other fields about the effects of drug shortages?
Yes, I have, particularly for drugs that are used for anesthesia, where the preferred agent is a generic which has not been continuously available, so there's been some drug substitution there. And I can't speak personally to the medical effects of that substitution, which may have been significant. Other commonly used things, such as electrolyte solutions, sodium and calcium solutions, for example, potassium solutions, have not been continuously available. Certain antibiotics, steroid drugs, which are useful in a variety of very commonly used injectable steroid drugs, and which have been the subject of the compounding pharmacy problem, those have been in short supply as well. The impact for us is not only that certain drugs are not available in which we would prefer to use in specific situations, but also it occupies a huge number of people trying to find the drugs. They have to buy them from alternative sources rather than the usual suppliers. It's called the gray market. They are not always quite certain where the drugs are coming from and don't have the same confidence as they would have purchasing from their usual suppliers. And it creates a huge amount of staff time and needless expense.
You discussed last year a number of steps that were being taken to begin addressing the problem. The FDA set up a special office for collecting information on drug shortages. There were stepped-up inspections of facilities that were shut down because of production problems, and requirements for drug importation were being loosened. Have any of these moves produced results?
I'm only really knowledgeable about the cancer drug situation. We have probably had some fewer problems in the recent months, although I can't say there's been any long-term improvement in the situation. I haven't seen any major loosening of requirements for bringing drugs in from outside manufacturers and from manufacturers outside the United States. I know that there are significant companies in Europe which are providing drug for the other parts of the world, and which very much could help solve our problem, and that are not now currently importing into the United States. And I don't know whether the FDA has really made any overtures to encourage them to bring drug into the United States.
As you say, there are some major companies that have generic products that are sold overseas but not here. Why haven't they been brought into the U.S.?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. One, the facilities have to be inspected by the FDA and approved. And secondly, we have tried to solve the problem internally, And so it's an additional administrative burden to bring in the outside suppliers. The other thing is that the incentive for the outside suppliers to come into the U.S. market is not great because our prices are kept relatively low by Medicare legislation, longstanding legislation, which controls price increases in the U.S. and this has contributed, I think, in a significant way to the fact that we don't have a number of suppliers for each of these drugs.
You and others have recommended changes to the Hatch-Waxman Act, including adding a requirement that there be a plan for meeting projected demand before a drug is approved. Has there been any action on that front?
I think people are actually thinking about this now in Congress. There are a series of hearings coming up on the drug shortage problem, which will address a number of new issues that weren't previously considered in any detail. I think this could make a difference. It seems to me that when a drug company is given a license to market a product, that there should also be with it an obligation, like there is with a utility, to provide the vital resource to the public. And these are vital resources. In the same way that electricity and other communications are regulated, I think that when you get a license to market a drug, you should be prepared to provide that drug and to be sure that your facilities are up to date and capable of that.
You mentioned price, increasing reimbursement for generic drugs to make them more profitable for the manufacturers. You've said in the past that this would have a minimal effect on the total cost of cancer care, but what about other medical specialties? Where would you find the balance between incentives for the manufacturers and the benefits of cost and access for patients?
Well, the issue for the manufacturer is pretty straightforward. If they have a choice of, they have a facility which is available and a choice of making drug A versus drug B, and they're reimbursed very generously for drug B, which is not a generic, it's on patent, versus drug A, which is on patent and for which the price is very stringently controlled. They're going to make the drug which makes them gives them a better profit. And that means that investment in upgrading facilities and making sure that there's good quality control, all of that is expensive. And if you're forced to sell a drug at a very low price, you're not going to be very happy to do that and to get into this market. So I think that we have to consider the economic incentive as well. It's a very small fraction of the cost of pharmaceuticals in the U.S. because patented drugs are sold at such a higher price. I think we could afford a small increase in the generic price index without having a great impact on the cost of medication.
Have compounding pharmacies offered a partial solution to these drug shortages? And if so, are the current quality issues raising some flags?
I think that would not be the best solution. We really have to solve the bigger problem of how we deal with compounding pharmacies, how we supervise them. And what we're talking about here is providing drug for a larger population, not for individual patients. The whole compounding pharmacy business was built on the idea that they would do very specialized things for individual patients, but not provide drug for thousands of patients. And in this case, we're talking about large numbers of patients needing drug, and it's just not the right solution. I think we need a well-regulated but efficient generic industry, and that's not something we have right now.
So to sum up, what do you think needs to be done to ensure that there's an adequate supply of essential drugs?
Well, I think there are a number of things. I did suggest some of them in that article. I think that we have to restore competition to the generic market. Part of the problem, which Congress is going to look into in the next few months, is the issue of whether purchasing is the purchasers, the hospital purchasing organizations, or what they're called GPOs, group purchasing organizations, are restricting competition unnecessarily, whether the prices being paid to the manufacturers are being held down unnecessarily, that an increase in price would encourage people to get into the market and produce competition, whether we could encourage foreign manufacturers to enter the market. Some of them are, among the best drug makers in the world. Organizations like Sanofi and Novartis, which are European firms, might be encouraged to come into this market if they could make a profit. and they're certainly capable of making the drugs. And I think that just some public pressure on the drug makers to upgrade their facilities and assure that they can make a drug once they're given the right to provide it and approval for the market. So I think all of those things could be helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Chabner.